Hello. Welcome everyone to the Tiny Earth Database webinar. We're happy that you joined us today, and we're going to jump right in. For those who are joining, welcome. So some general reminders. Your system is muted because it's being recorded. But we please encourage you to use the chat feature on the side to ask questions or to post thoughts during the webinar. This will be available later to watch or to share. And you won't need your camera or microphone during the webinar, but again, we encourage that chat feature. We encourage it so much that we're going to show it to you right here. So in case you're just new to Zoom, there's a button on the bottom that says chat. And when you click that, it's going to open up a group chat. You can respond to everyone and post your questions as we go. So with us today, thank you for all the instructors and students that are joining us. Behind the scenes, we have a bunch of presenters. My name is Jennifer. I'm joining you from the Tiny Earth Chemistry Hub. With me is Martel. Joining us is Nicole, Amy, and Sarah, who are all going to be available on the chat, and Nicole will be available later to answer questions as well. An overview of today. This tutorial, this webinar, is designed mostly for our new and early users. We're going to give an overview of the Tiny Earth database, tutorials on how to set up accounts, enter data, use the database in your classroom, and more. And then a quick overview of the public side, and end with some troubleshooting and tips. We're going to try to leave about 20 minutes for questions and answers at the end. So again, please load your questions to the group chat. In case you want to practice or try things out in the database, you can reach it at data.tinyearth.wisc.edu. This is totally optional because we'll be showing you a lot of screenshots of the interface as we go along. But in case you want to participate on your own as we're going through. So what happens if you don't have an account? If you're an instructor, we would request that you please email us, tinyearth@wid.wisc.edu, and we will set to getting you an account. And then if you're a student, we're going to hear today how your instructor goes through the process of requesting you an account. So you would receive an email from this No Reply Tiny Earth after your instructor has gone through the process. So a little bit of background. I think everybody here is familiar with Tiny Earth, but whether you're new to Tiny Earth this semester or you've been with us for years, you're part of this amazing global network. You can see the many locations Tiny Earth is being taught around the world, and this map continues to expand. From June and January trainings, we have 58 new instructors representing many new countries that are also part of our network. So with over 10,000 students each year, you can imagine the amount of research being done by this group. Also, just imagine all those Petri plates people are pouring, so kudos to you. So the Tiny Earth database was released this summer as a way we can record and share this information. The database is available to all our members around the world as a tool to log things, and it also has a public-facing side that we can share with the rest of the world and the scientific community. So it provides a great resource for us. The database provides many things to our network. It's a critical step in discovering new antibiotics. With the uniform data collection, it allows for comparisons and standardized record keeping across the world. It's a resource for the Tiny Earth network to log in and share information. So data moves to the public database and you can see that, you can share that. Also, while part of a class, students and instructors can all see the information that the class is logging. So you can really use this as a tool in your Tiny Earth courses. It's a big resource for us here at the Tiny Earth Chemistry Hub. It's one of the main ways that we connect with your information. And we use all the isolate information that you enter to do some of our preliminary screening. And we love all of the uploads that you put in there, the tests that you log, the notes that you enter, any pictures. It helps us to know more about your isolates. Also, as we mentioned, there's a public-facing side for this data. And so that data is available to the public, has uses in a variety of ways, ecology research, classroom studies, and at the end of the presentation, you'll get a glimpse of what's available on the public side. It's being added to constantly. So here's a workflow many of you may recognize. Many of our Tiny Earth courses follow a similar flow to what's shown here. Soils collected, plated for bacterial colonies. Students then isolate bacteria and test them for antibiotic activity. And often further escapes are done. So where does the database fit in this process? The database collects information on your soil sample. So that's a way that you can enter. It also has a space for your culture conditions, your escape test, and other tests you may do in your classroom. So Martel will be going into detail on each of these entries later on, so stay tuned. Today, we're going to be highlighting and going through some of the functions of these 3 common user viewpoints. As an instructor, you can create a class and enter student information. You can also see all your students and their entries, and you're able to promote isolates. The promotion I'm going to talk about later, so don't worry if that word doesn't make sense right now. As a student, you can enter soil, culture, and isolate information, see other students in your class. Both the instructor and student accounts are password protected. The public database is a resource available for anyone with web access, and it contains all the records that have been approved. No logins needed. You can just go to the public page and take a look. So from here, we're going to dive into the main actions for each user type. As a reminder, please enter any questions you have into the chat bar on the side. We have staff monitoring the chat, and we'll answer the questions there or at the end of the presentation. So we're going to be going through those 3 user types. And to orientate you during the webinar, you can always check the top right corner to see which viewpoint we're displaying from. We're going to start with a short tutorial on the instructor's actions and tools. So your first step into getting into the database is to create an account. After you complete training, you would receive an invitation to create an account from the Tiny Earth admin team. If you don't have an account, just a reminder, instructors, please send us an email and we will get you going on the database. After the initial setup of your account, whenever you're using the database, your first step is to log in. So just a reminder, this is a great link to bookmark in your web browsers, data.tinyearth.wisc.edu. After you log in, you will be directed to this landing page. And we're going to go through a few of the options here in terms of the layout. So you start on the page for students. And from here, you have a drop-down menu over here where you can see the classes that you have created. On the right-hand side, you have options to do a variety of things with your classes. Remove the class, rename it, add students, or create a class to begin with, add class. Near the top, there is a tab for data. And then there's also an option to go directly to the public database. One of the most important steps you as an instructor will take is adding your class. This is how your students get invited to be part of the database. To add a class, you can click on the drop-down of your classes, and it's the last option that's shown here on the left. Or you can use the big blue button on the right that says Add Class. They're both going to take you to the same page. So after you click on one of those options, it's going to open a page that looks like this, in which you're going to enter your class information. You're going to give your class a name. You can set a schedule if you would like. The schedule line is optional and it's a text field. And then the institution is going to be assigned to you based on where you're at. That's something that's assigned beforehand. For example, for me, I'm part of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So when I click on that, I only have one option, and I select the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So from here, you can choose Save and Exit, and it'll take you back to that landing page. Or you could go ahead and add your students right away. So after you have your class, you need to add students to it. And then when you're making the class, if you have these emails ready and with you, you can add them in this way. Another way that you can do this is also from the landing page. And I'm going to show you that right here. So if we go back to the landing page, on the right-hand side circled, you can hit Add Students. And so that's something that you can do at any time. Let's say a student adds to your class later, or you're doing a variety of things with your classes, you can always add the students. When you click Add Students in either way, you are going to go to a page that looks like this. Only has one step, and you are going to choose the class that you want the students to be part of. So in this case, we have example class selected. And then you copy and paste the student email addresses into that box. You don't need any names for your students. The students will add their names when they create their account. And as soon as you hit Save here, the students will shortly receive an email to create their account. So this is, again, how the students become part of the database. So to recap on the students' accounts, they'll only have access if you add them to a class. And as soon as you save the student email in your class, they'll receive an email from the Tiny Earth No Reply to create a login. Going back to the landing page, after you've been using the database for some time, you'll likely have more than one class. So when you're here in the landing page, you can hit the caret next to where the class list is to open the drop-down to see all the classes that you have created. Here you can select any class of interest to bring up that list of students. So in this case, I have selected demo class, and my class is not terribly interesting. I only have one student, Tiny Earthling. But if I wanted to see the information this student has entered, such as soil, culture conditions, and isolates, I can click on that student's name. A few things to note here is that the student's name is in blue, and this is fairly uniform throughout this database. If you see words in blue, they're often links. So in this case, the Tiny Earthling name is blue, and that's a link for us to go to more information. We can see here in the snapshot that this student has one soil sample entered, one culture condition entered, and one isolate entered. If I were to click on the student's name, it will take me to all of the entries that this student has. So again, we're going with the blue theme, and you can see soil sample, culture, isolate, and the numbers after are all in blue. And these are all links that allow you to get detailed information on what the student has entered. Martel is going to give us a detailed overview on each of these entries in the student section. So that's going to conclude the instructor brief tutorial. If you have any questions about any of the things that we covered, please add them to the chat and they will be answered there, or we'll get back to them at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Martel, who's going to talk on the student part.
Hello everyone, my name is Martel and I'm a post back in the Tiny Earth Chemistry Hub, and I'm going to walk us through a brief tutorial on the student view of the Tiny Earth database. So before we get started, I wanted to let everyone know that there's a full tutorial in PDF form on the student side of the Tiny Earth database, and anyone can access this, students or instructors or the public. You can access it via the link at the top of this page, or from the Tiny Earth website under the Community tab and clicking on Database, and then you'll see Student Database Tutorial. We'll be going over a majority of the student side of the database here, but this resources resource is available to you at any time as well. So first, just a brief overview of what is involved in the student side of the Tiny Earth database. This is a lot of information, but there are 3 key pieces here. First, you will enter information on your soil sample. You will enter information about your culture conditions, and you will enter information about your antibiotic producing isolates. Each step has data that is required to enter by the Tiny Earth Chemistry Hub, but your instructor will provide information on what data to enter into the database. Before you can enter any data, you will have to make an account, and you will get an email, which will come from the Tiny Earth no reply email, but your instructor will have sent this request, and you can click on the button to accept the invitation. And once you receive this email, follow the instructions to set up your username and password. This is what the page will look like once you've accepted the invitation to make your Tiny Earth database account. You'll enter your name, password, and for the future, your username will be your email address. So this is what the home page of the student account looks like. You will see we are currently on the dashboard, but you also have access to the public side of the database by clicking here. And we will talk more about that later on. So as you enter data, this is the page where it will all be stored and accessible. The first piece of information you need to enter is information on your soil sample. You can do this by clicking where it's circled here, and you're able to enter multiple soil samples under this account. So once you've clicked on enter a soil sample, you'll be directed to this page, and the first piece of data needed about your soil sample is its collection location. First, type the city or address of the soil collection site, and you can be as specific as possible. Then you can drag the pin to the exact location of your soil collection. For example, I collected soil from outside of the Tiny Earth Chemistry Hub headquarters in Madison, Wisconsin. So first I searched Madison in the search bar, and then I dragged the pin to the space outside of our building where I collected the soil. And this will provide us the exact coordinates of the soil collection location. This information is required for isolates in the Tiny Earth database. So once you finish that, you can click next, and you'll be directed to the second page of the soil data part of the database. So you're now on step 2 of the soil data entry form. Here you will enter the time and date of the soil collection, and you can make it easier by just clicking on this little calendar icon and select the time and date of collection. There's also a space to describe the surrounding area of your soil collection site. You may provide information regarding vegetation, traffic, weather conditions, etc. And you're also able to enter the temperature in Celsius. If you click on if there's an icon that's a little eye on any of these pages, you will get more information on what's included in that field. If you collected soil from private land or other land off of your campus, you will need to upload a private soil donor form, and your instructor will provide you with more information regarding this form. Once you've clicked next on that page, you'll see this page, which is the soil characteristics. So this is really getting into what your soil is made out of and specifics on where you collected it. So you can enter information about the depth of your sample collection, the type of soil, which you can select from the drop-down menu. You can enter information about air humidity, soil temperature, pH of soil, and soil water content. You may be working with a partner or a group on one soil sample. So if this is the case, only one person in that partnership or group needs to submit information about the soil. Group members should be added under the additional attribution line, and this prevents redundancy in the data in the database. Once you're finished with this, you can click Submit. And this is what the finished soil data page will look like. At any point, you're able to edit the soil entry or delete it completely by clicking on the icons on the top here. After you've created your soil sample in the database, it will give you a number for that soil sample. And as you see here, the number is 8942. So any of your classmates are able to search this number and add data under that soil sample. So if you have multiple people working from one soil sample, they should just search that number and they can enter other pieces of information under that soil sample. And later on in the course, when you have cultured bacteria on plates, you can add culture conditions of your soil bacteria by clicking on this blue box at the bottom. This is the second piece of the data that's part of the student side of the Tiny Earth database, the first being the soil collection, and now we're at culture conditions. So this culture conditions has two parts. The first part is where you will select the type of media you cultured on, temperature of incubation, CFUs per gram of soil of your dilution plates, the total number of isolates tested against escape safe relatives from this condition, and the total number of antibiotic producers of those tested in this culture condition, as well as percent antibiotic resistance frequency. Again, talk with your instructor about which fields you will be entering for your course, as you may not be entering all of these. By clicking next, you can get to the next set of questions on your culture conditions. So here you will see you had the opportunity to upload photos. You can download photos from your computer by clicking the Upload Photos box in blue and select which photos you'd like to submit by clicking here. You can type information about these photos in the space below, and you will want to make sure to include your partner's name or your group members' names if they worked with this culture condition as well in the additional attribution site. Then you can click Submit. And you'll see your finished culture conditions page, where you will also have another number for this culture condition linked to the Tiny Earth database. And just as a reminder, you can enter multiple culture conditions under a single soil sample. So once you're at the point in your course where you have antibiotic producing bacteria that you would like to enter into the database, you can click on the blue box down here and add an isolate record. We use the term isolate to describe an antibiotic producing bacteria that you will include in your studies and in the database. So the first thing in the isolate record that you will need to do is create a nickname for this isolate. And a nickname that makes most sense to you or that your instructor suggests is what you should go with here. Keep in mind that your nickname will be viewable by the public once your isolates are entered into the public database. Your isolate will also be given a Tiny Earth database number, like your soil sample and your culture condition, but the number for your isolates will be tied always to this nickname that you provided. So if other researchers are working on this isolate, please add their name or names in the additional attribution line below the nickname that you give your isolate. So next is the escape test. This is the other piece of required information from the Tiny Earth database from the student side. After you've given your isolate a nickname, you'll be prompted to enter screening results information. There's a list of escape safe relatives on this page, of which you can click not tested. You can click yes, and that means it's been tested and has activity. Your isolate has activity against that safe relative. Or no, meaning it has been tested but does not have activity against the said escape relative. If you screen your isolate against a pathogenic relative that is not on this list, you can click the blue words, add another bacteria at the bottom, and enter the genus and species name here, along with yes or no, does your isolate have activity against that pathogen? If you see activity against the different pathogens and you've clicked the yes box, you need to enter information about its incubation time and the media that it was grown on. Again, if you do not see the media type that you used on this drop-down menu list, you can type and click the media that you did use. By clicking next, you'll be prompted to the second step of the escape test, where you'll be directed to upload photos and describe those photos if you choose. Any isolate with positive activity against an escape relative can be submitted here in the photo section. Once you enter your escape screening results, you will see the page of your isolate, and you can always enter more escape screening results. If you do it multiple times, just click on escape, or you can enter other test results such as 16S rRNA PCR test, antibiotic activity of extracts, and eukaryotic inhibition tests. So first, let's look at how to enter 16S data. Click on 16S rRNA test. Here you can enter the genus of your isolate by choosing from the drop-down menu, or by typing in a genus that is not present in this list. Make sure to click that genus name after you type it in. If you just type it in and hit your enter key, it will not select that genus. You have to click it after you type it. Here you can also copy and paste 16S rRNA sequence into the space below, and you can upload sequencing files by clicking upload sequencing files. And these files can be the original files that you get from your 16S sequence. For example, you do not need to upload a Word document with your sequence. You can just paste that into the field here and upload the raw data. The third piece of information you can enter in your isolate entry is antibiotic activity of extract. Data entered here is similar to what you entered for the escape test. So you will see a list of the escape pathogenic relatives, of which you can check the boxes not tested, no, or yes, based on if it was tested and does or does not have activity. If you selected yes, again, you will be prompted to enter culture time and media. And like the escape test as before, if you tested against a bacteria that is not on this list, you can add another bacteria and enter the information for that. Once you click next from this list, you'll be directed to the second page of the antibiotic activity of extract data, where you can describe your protocol. And if you used a protocol from the Tiny Earth handbook, you can reference that. But if there's deviations, you can enter that there and also talk to your instructor if you have questions. So last, we're going to look at eukaryotic inhibition. Your class may or may not get to this point, but if you do have data with this, we would love for you to submit it to the Tiny Earth database. So this is what the page will look like to enter data into the eukaryotic inhibition site. So first, you'll want to record the organism that you tested your bacteria or its chemical extract against, and then check the box yes or no whether that isolate inhibited the growth of that eukaryotic organism. You may add as many eukaryotic organisms in this field as you have tested, and then you can click next. On the second page, as you can see from the bottom of the screen, you can also enter information about the protocol that you used to screen your isolate against the eukaryotic organism. So once you've entered information about your isolate, you will have information about its escape test. You might have information about its 16S rRNA gene. You might have information about its antibiotic activity of its extract and eukaryotic inhibition. So you can see all of these things under the isolates page. And you can click edit if you want to review the information or if you want to edit the information. And to do that, you just click on the blue pencil icon. So now to get back to all of your data, you can click on the dashboard tab at the top. Or you can go directly to other soil samples or culture conditions that you have entered into the database by clicking here. If you do go back to the dashboard, this is what you'll see: your soil sample, culture conditions, and any isolates under that culture condition. So that wraps up the tutorial on how to navigate the student side of the Tiny Earth database. A reminder, if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat on the side of Zoom. And we're going to take a brief break for you to type in your questions if you have them, and then we'll move on to the public side.
We're going to give about another 10 seconds or so for questions. Okay, thank you. And we please encourage you to keep using that group chat. The information that you put there really helps us all to share and to start thinking about different situations that you'll be having in your classrooms. So for you and your students, when you enter the information, only the instructors and students and admins for the Tiny Earth database can see those records. So we're going to highlight the process in which the data that you have moves into the public-facing database. So to do that, I'm going to start by reviewing how the database is organized. I promise I'll get to the buttons, but this is kind of the overview of what happens. We went through the student entry. Thank you, Martel. After that, the instructor can review and edit or ask the student to edit their entries. And at that point, once the instructor is pleased with the entry, that instructor can promote the isolate. From there, the admin team can publish the isolate, and then it becomes visible on the public database. So the words promotion and publish are specific nomenclature for our Tiny Earth database. There are two levels of securities that we had put in place here. After the student enters that information and the instructor reviews it, the promotion is always done by the instructor. and it's always done on the isolate record, not the soil or culture record. So that directs the information to the admin. So from here, how does this look in practical terms? Right now we're in the instructor view, and as an instructor you can go into your students' isolate records. So Martel just finished talking about how the student would enter the variety of tests that the isolate can have, and here we have isolate 10,921, and this one has an escape test. Let's say that this was one of your students' isolates and you reviewed it. This is the only test that you're putting in. Over here on the right, there is an icon that is for promote. So if you click on this icon, when you feel that the entry is ready, it will be pushed up to the admin side. So the admin will see this newly promoted isolate and will be able to publish it on the public database. The way that the isolate looks to you in terms of the number, the tests, whose student it's tied to, and the soil sample and culture conditions it's tied to, that's going to all remain the same, and you'll still continue to see it in your pages the same as before. What will happen is when you click on that icon, it's going to just say promoted. So from there, it would head to the admin, and then the Tiny Earth admin would publish it onto the public side. So there's a variety of ways of accessing the public database. In our instructor view and student view landing pages that we talked about, both of those have links that would take you to the public database. There's also a link on the Tiny Earth login for the database page. Right at the bottom, it's circled, Tiny Earth Public Database. And so that's the way that you would be able to access this information if you didn't log in. The public view looks something like this. So when you click Public Database, this page would show up. It has a filter option on the left in blue, and that allows you to do some basic filtering here. Another feature that is helpful is the download all on the right-hand side, and that will allow you to download all the information on those isolates. So that would include their escape profiles and their culture conditions, location for soil collection. Everything that the student has entered would be put into that download all. Here in the web interface, we see a limited amount of information. This is something that we're working on improving, so you do have those two options. One, the filter, where you can narrow down the isolates that way, or you can download into Excel and start doing some sorting as you're familiar with Excel. From here, we're going to wrap up with some tips and tricks, and then move on to our question section. So as Martel mentioned, there is a PDF version of the student tutorial. We encourage students for you to share that with your classmates, and instructors to share that with your students. It's available on the Tiny Earth webpage. We also encourage instructors to start thinking about their class flow and plan in time or schedule entry time into the course. The soil, culture, and isolate information do not need to be added all at the same time. You can log one, leave the system, log back in, and add another information. So this doesn't all have to be added at the end and can possibly be spread out in terms of time. If you have any troubleshooting, you have any questions that maybe we didn't answer today, or they come up as you're working through the system, if you experience any issues with the system, we want to know about it. So please send us any questions or issues you experience at tinyearth@wid.wisc.edu. And also, please stay tuned for more information and training. The team here has been working on a lot of updates and more tools for the database. It's already underway, and we're excited for the new things that are coming. So this is an opportunity for you to put in any other questions you have. Maybe there was something we didn't cover that you want to be touched on, any general questions or questions on the public view or on the instructor or student section. So you're encouraged to continue to work with the chat and continue to enter in questions in the chat as we move to the question portion. We're going to turn it over to Nicole, who's going to be answering some of your questions that you've been posting in that chat. I want to thank everyone very much for attending. We really appreciate you sharing your Friday with us, and we look forward to all the wonderful things that you're entering into the database.
Hi, everyone. So there have been a few questions that hopefully you've seen on the chat box that I've tried to address. So you are able to, so as the student goes through creating an entry, at each level there, so they are given an ID associated with that. So when they add a soil sample at the end, when they hit save, if they go to their data, they'll then be able to see in a list that soil sample. Likewise, they can add culture conditions. So this is nice because if you have students sharing a soil sample, they're able to do their own culture conditions, for example. So say they're using different media types, they're able to do that. They then also, or for example, if they share the same soil and use the same soil conditions, but you're having them do different isolates out of that, they're able to all link back to that same culture and soil sample so that people don't have to add the same information more than once. So I think some of Drew's later questions went to private. So I'm gonna switch that back to everyone. And so who's just asking for clarification? Can no one hear me? I'm talking, but I'm not. This is the one part of this that's weird. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I finally got some down there in the chat box. So that's how, and so in terms of, yeah, so so actually, if we could go back to, Jen, can you go back to a slide that shows like the structure of how, if you're on an isolate, it kind of shows the hierarchy of the soil sample, culture condition, and then isolates underneath of it? Because I think maybe that can help. Yeah, so this is how the thing there, and so you'll see the forward code number. It's currently 4 codes. Obviously, once we get over, to 10,000 isolates in the database, these will increase in number. But that's the ID, the unique ID that we're talking about being given to everything. The other question was about editing. Can you edit a sample? And so yes, so if you see something and you're like, they did not culture that at 100 degrees Celsius, they made a mistake, you can go in and edit that. You can go also tell them to go and edit it, and they can edit themselves. But you also can do this, for example, if you have a small class size, this is now something you can even do at the stage where you're promoting isolates. We're working on the future version, I think Jen kind of alluded to this, of where you would be able to see if you've got a larger class or you've just taught this so many semesters, you have a lot more information. You'd be able to see all of your information. And even then, even after something is promoted, you can contact us and we can work with we can go into the database and we can correct things if there's an error. So there is an ability, even once it's been pushed to the public side, which we'll talk about next, to be able to do that. I think that was the main questions so far in the chat boxes. So if anyone has something else. So Olivia just asked about past data. So 2 things. We're working on if you previously had your students enter data through either the old Small World database, or through there was a short term where like one semester I had created the Qualtrics entry that could kind of mimic that for people being able to add data. I think it was in fall of 2018. We're working on doing a batch upload of that. If it's just in student notebooks and you want to add it, or you've got an Excel sheet of it, you currently could do that manually, or even have a student do it, and that's where that page where people can put in like who actually collected it is a good way of then attributing it to the student who originally did it. If you have more than a handful or even a dozen or so, we may do a call out, because we can do through the database team some batch uploads, but we want to try to minimize the number of those that we're doing. So we may try to do a call out and ask people what kind of numbers they have. So be on the lookout for that. And Sarah put in our notes that we need to maybe ask about that, and Jen. But otherwise, there are ways to do that. And you could, for example, make a class that's just old student data, and then have sort of, someone, if you have students who work with you in the lab right now, or who work for, they're doing something for extra credit or things like that, and have them enter the information. That's also a possibility. And we would rather have that information in the database than just sitting on your hard drive. So please do add it. So maybe we can have a wrap up of the public database, and then open it one last time for any sort of questions. So Martel and Jen, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicole. And thank you everyone who participated today. Yes, I'm going to go to this slide here to remind everyone, if questions come up while you are going through, please email us, tinyearth@wid.wisc.edu. We really would like to hear your feedback on what you're using it for, where it's working, where it isn't, and encourage you to stay in touch with this. Hopefully in the future, you'll be hearing more about us on the updates and more tools, as well as further training. If there is a particular aspect of the database that you would like training on, again, that would be a great thing to put in the chat. We'll leave the chat open for another minute or two. Put that in the chat or send us an email so we know what to focus on and what's most helpful to you. So with that, I am going to thank everyone for joining us today, and wish you the very best for your microbes and your experimenting this semester. Perfect. Yep. And in the chat, there is the email. All right. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful Friday.